Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Welcome to this episode of the Note Culture Show. I'm Scott Carson, excited to be with you here on this afternoon recording episode. And I'm even more honored to have an amazing guy that may not know what an impact he has had on this show, actually, believe it or not. We have this week between, end of Thanksgiving and the 1st of December, talking about some of the events that you should be going to in 2019. And this year, I went to an event down in Orlando, Florida, that is so like a family atmosphere, so close to what like my Note Mastermind is like, and met this amazing guy there who's been putting it on for 5 years, does an amazing job. And so I'm a big believer that if you're going to be podcasting and looking to start a podcast, this is the one must-attend event you must go to. And I'm honored to have my buddy Chris Krimitsos. I hope I pronounced that correctly. I know I butchered it.
It was pretty good.
Pretty good there, right? We'll have Chris on, who is the founder of the Podfest Expo, who's now going to be in his 5th year. And just thanks for joining us, man. I know you've been busy. You got a little one on the way here as well, too. But you are a man and a legend running around there. Really, I would say one of the biggest advocates for the podcasting community. So thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us.
Hey, thanks, Scott. Thanks for asking me to be on what people don't realize. I don't get asked to be on a lot of podcasts because people assume I'm so busy, which I am, but I'm still honored when friends and peers invite me onto their podcast. So thanks for having me on this podcast/live stream.
Yeah, so you've been known, you come from the background of doing a lot of events. Why don't we talk a little about your background and how that kind of phased into podcasting?
So, well, my background originally is media. I started in the real estate circles. So, it all seems like the real estate circles breed a lot of people. So I would go to real estate events, like Larry Harbold has a Monday night meeting in Tampa, Florida. That's legendary. It's been going on now for, I think, 17 years. Every Monday night, every week for 17. It's insane. So I started going to those real estate events, and then I figured, how can I differentiate myself? And kind of like what you're doing, I figured back then it was easier to get on TV. So I got on terrestrial TV and I created a show called Millionaire Mindset, where I would literally interview a lot of these real estate speakers that would come through the town with all of them had different topics and niches that they focused on. And then we started The Bleep and Truth. The Bleep and Truth was a political debate show that was extremely controversial for the time. So long story short, the shows were doing great. We had a fight break out on the political debate show. One of the guests left the set and threw a chair at the other one on live TV. I had to get a First Amendment attorney I had to get one of the top First Amendment attorneys, and he represents the adult industry, so he's a great First Amendment attorney, to represent me and my plight, I guess, at the station. So I was able to get my show back, but a year later, they took me off the air. And it was all on a technicality. And if anyone knows anything about corporate America, they're always going to get you on a technicality. And I learned what P&P means, which is policy and procedure. I literally would read that book and find the loopholes. Eventually, they wrote a loophole out of the book that I didn't realize they passed the amendment under the cover of dark and took my ass out about a year later. So what I did was I took the real estate show, even though it was more of a business show, but honestly, real estate in Florida in 0506 was like the topic. And I took that show and we created a community of like-minded individuals back then. And we called it the Tampa Bay Business Owners. And I didn't realize this, but my show, I had built a lot of influence locally. So I sent out an email to 300 people and I got 99 people to show up. So yeah, it was like I had an immense amount of influence in the local area. And we built this community of entrepreneurs, and out of that community, we would create events based on the feedback we got. And I averaged about, 125 to 150 events a year for 9 years, for the first 7 years, and then we slow down. So within that course of 10 years, I did over 2,000 events. And we're talking about meetups, we're talking about symposiums with 500 attendees, but all local business owners that had to buy tickets to the events or they were members. So it was a lot of work. We did a lot of different masterminds, and I learned a lot through the event process. And then during one of those events, one of the speakers talked about podcasting, and my one good ear perked up, and I said, "Wow, that sounds like my old media background." Even though I was doing live interviews of entrepreneurs in front of 100 people seated in a theater, I was looking to get back in to the TV game or the radio game, but I knew it had changed. So I was looking for an opportunity. And podcasting, the audio medium just seemed a lot easier to get started. And that's when I went home, told my wife, I'm going to start podcasting. And she said, I want to start a podcast. And we had a really great business consultant who said, you both can't start one at the same time. We said, why not? Because you're doing 150 events a year. He goes, you can't just take your eye off the ball, both of you, and think it's still going to go. So my wife had a great niche, Biz Women Rock. So I said, I'll be your marketing manager and I'll get the psychic benefits of helping you launch your podcast. I still didn't know what show I wanted to do because I was a generalist. And her show took off. She's one of the top podcasters in the world. But I saw my wife put like 30, 40 all-nighters where she didn't sleep trying to figure out the technology. And I said, this got to be an easier way. So after we had done 2 workshops, I said, let's organize everybody, do a yearly conference. Let's do a meetup here locally, and let's see how that would grow. And now we're celebrating 5 years, over 1,000 attendees will be at Podfest 2019. And it's all happened out of wanting to help my wife and other podcasters through their growth cycles. In the process, I have like 7 or 8 podcasts. You just never hear me talk about them. I'm more of a producer, so I love producing my podcasts and have other people working on them with me.
There you go. Yeah, good stuff on that aspect there. You do have several ones that are rocking and rolling. You've got a variety of little niches aspect that you found out there. You know, we were visiting in San Antonio here a couple of weeks ago with Tom at the San Antonio Small Business Expo, basically.
Yeah, John Largent was there.
John Largent, yes.
Yeah, great people.
Yeah, and one of the great things you talked about, and I've brought this up as well too, because I run a very snitchy podcast with what I do in the real estate community. And we were talking about how there was a couple and they've kind of faded off and vice versa. And I'm excited. Hopefully we got a few more people that are going to come on consistently and doing a show. But that's the biggest thing I think a lot of people struggle with is they like to start something and then they have pod fade, or they just, they don't stick with consistency wise. Are there any suggestions you can give to somebody to stick with something or to keep rock and rolling things to help them kind of be clear on their message, or any tips?
So early on in my business career, I had the pleasure of bringing in the author of Guerrilla Marketing, J. Conrad Levinson. He has since passed, but he did 2 keynotes for me. I have to release those. The recording of him is amazing. But he said something that was really amazing. And if you don't know who J. Conrad Levinson is, he created the cowboy for the Marlboro cigarettes. He created the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, Die Hard Battery. I mean, on and on. I mean, the guy created some of the most iconic brands we all know. He said something that I'll never forget. He said, I hate to say this, but this is true. He said, what did he say? He said, bad branding with consistent marketing will beat exceptional branding with inconsistent marketing. And basically consistency over time builds trust. And when you have the trust of the public, your sales actually increase. So for instance, Scott, for you right now, you and I are talking about something, podcasting, you're asking my history, but you have behind you, we close notes. So just the branding of that behind your head consistently, I know you get people, I know I've asked you to look at a deal. They think of you as the note guy. Even though right now we're not talking about notes, your branding behind you is very consistent. So it's just being consistent about what your brand is. And if you're a podcaster, do it consistently. My advice to you is if you start and you find that you want to change things up, it's okay to pause and then restart. But when you restart, try and do it consistently, because the consistency is what's going to win over time. But at the same time, we're in a period of time where you could find a niche and there's no competition, and you could inconsistently do it and still win because you have no one to play against, if that makes sense.
No, that totally makes sense. And it's such a growing genre, I say, of market or media out there. Yeah, people are used to TV, people are used to radio,
right?
Stuff like that. People are used to email marketing, lead pages. But the podcasting side it's kind of the next new frontier. Star Trek, the next generation. Podcast is the next generation of marketers out there. And there's so many ways to kind of do it. And you do a really great job at Podfest about kind of blending the audio side of things. And then you also brought on some of the YouTube guys, the YouTube experts that are using video primarily for stuff like that. Where do you kind of see things going here in the next year or two as far as
next year or two? You're just going to see a lot more the voice activated devices. We're only just as a culture just started using, those Alexa and Google Minis or whatever tools are voice activated. But a lot more streaming. You're doing streaming right now on Facebook, and then you're podcasting this out. So there's going to be a convergence of all of it. I see YouTubers jumping into the podcasting space. I see podcasters, not by and large, but a few jumping into the YouTube space. So you're going to see it all converge. And as we get into driverless vehicles, it's a bit of ways. We still got some time before everybody's in driverless vehicles. But when that happens, that convergence is important, because if I'm driving, if my car is driving, I could watch something. So I might rather watch Scott Carson's podcast instead of listening to it. Mm-hmm. That's not going to happen in the next year or two, but that's going to happen around the corner after that. So you want to play with all the mediums, and you want to find what does well. And here's what I found: dominate one medium. So let's say you have trouble focusing. Find one thing that you're really good at, and then so you have one communication medium. For instance, Scott, you have your podcast, and what you're already doing is you're promoting it through social media. So you're very good at multitasking. But let's say someone's not as good as you multitasking. Right. I would say have your podcast, and then find your Instagram or your Facebook. Find the +1 that you're really good at, that really moves the needle, and get good at that. And then once you have time, scale out to the next things. We've seen that with YouTubers and podcasters. The most successful ones are tunnel visioned. Then as money starts coming in, because they've built something great, they start implementing different verticals as they have more time and energy to put into that.
Mm-hmm. What's been one of the biggest surprises that you've had from the last couple of years of running Podfest Expo? I mean, you've started small, now you're over 1,000 people going to be at this next one.
Honestly, right now I can't really tell you the names of the sponsors that we've been talking to the last week or two, but mega like companies that were on my wish list now are getting introduced to me, asking me to sponsor when I was not begging, but I would send emails like, hey, you guys should be here. So it's surprising me how big these companies in the billions of dollars are now paying attention to podcasting, whereas a year ago, 2 years ago, they kind of knew they needed to pay attention. But when I say pay attention, they're actually putting their money where their mouth is. And it's a pleasant surprise. I know that would happen, but it's pleasant surprising that they're calling me, because they know from people like yourself that our event's quality and they want to be in front of it. So I can't release the names just yet. We're in negotiations, but that, and the other thing, there's a company out of China called Himalaya, and they have 450 million users, and they're the Audible and the podcast player in one in China. And what I really enjoyed learning about them was they'll have like artwork on a train that might depict a story. And that artwork is a QR code. And you could literally put your phone up to the artwork and then listen to the story. So they're doing really high-end marketing. And in the US, it hasn't taken off. They've tested it. But Himalaya is coming into the US market. And I'm happy about the competition, because this more competition we have, the better it is for the podcasters, because the tools are just going to get better. And right now there's a lot of money in venture capital being invested. Obviously, most of these companies will not survive, but the cool thing is hopefully the best of the best survive, and we all have better tools to, like right now you're using a couple tools to get this out to Facebook. Eventually, we almost want it to be seamless, where it's just, maybe you're just using Zoom or Facebook integrates it, and you don't really have to think about setting up 2 or 3 things before we get on our call. That's going to happen in the next year or two.
Totally agree with that. If you guys are watching this and you have questions for Chris, go ahead and type it. We got some fans out there. We got Tyler, our buddy Tyler Shelf says,
Tyler, hey Tyler.
Woohoo. Tim Holloway says hello. Mark Asquith says, want to play ping pong?
So let me tell you about that. Mark and I were hanging out at FinCon, and he wouldn't play. We were at a beautiful house in Orlando, and it had a full game room, and it had a ping pong table. And Mark is British, and he's like, I haven't really played ping pong. But he relented, but by the time he relented, it was about 1 a.m. in the morning. And I just, my brain was not functioning with my arms, and he kept winning. And he loves playing ping pong, even though I begged him to play. I regret ever asking him to play.
Did you have a few adult beverages while your hands weren't working well with your eye to?
It was a long night. Yeah, there's after parties when you go to these things. By the time we got back, it was like my brain was not functioning.
Right. Our buddy James Van Proyen also says, I love it. Thanks for starting such a great community. You're a great friend. Let's talk a little about that because you do an amazing thing the first night of Podfest. You know, the first night you bring everybody together, all right, and share a little about what you do because I think that's one of the most valuable things of the event.
So you and the attendees would call it speed networking. I would call, or like they'll say speed dating, speed networking. I would call it more of a strategic alliance. So what I do, everything I do is very intentional. So after 10 years of connecting business owners, we tested stuff out over and over. So you're the beneficiary of literally 2,000 events when you come to Podfest. So what we do is I had an actuary. An actuary, if someone doesn't know, is someone that creates math equations to figure out like really weird things. You know, when you look at betting spreads in Vegas, actuaries figure out. When you look at pensions for when someone's going to die and how much a company has to pay, an actuary figures. So I found an actuary from Wells Fargo, and the guy as a hobby would go to events where they crack codes and trivia and stuff like for a hobby. So I said, this is my guy. I said, listen, I have a problem. He goes, what's the problem? I said, we've done this speed networking thing where we match people chair to chair, like you see in the movies. I go, but the problem is if half the room is talking, it's tough for the other half to hear. And then there's a proximity thing. And then now you're changing too many chairs. I said, is there a way for us to put people in a round table, 7 people per round table, and only switch them once every, let's say 15 minutes and never meet the same person again? If we could do 4 or 5 rounds. He said, let me take a crack at it. And he figured out this equation that I have, that I share everything. That's the one thing I won't share. It's a trade secret. But he figured out this amazing equation where you show up, you get a table number. It tells you what table to sit at. And then the part that I really engineered was I orchestrate everything from the stage. So that way you never have to worry about what your elevator speech is. And literally all you have to do is tell the group your name, your company name, and then whatever questions I ask you to answer. And they're very simple questions. That strategic alliance brings everybody together before it is the kickoff of the event. But now you just met 30 people, and we haven't even started really the meat of the event, let's say. That's probably one of the greatest things that we do for Podfest. And then we end with a gratitude ceremony, as you know. So the audience becomes the closing keynote, which I think is very unique.
Mm-hmm. Those are 2 definitely hugely unique things at your event that nobody else does. Love it. Made some great connections at the round tables on the opening night and stuff like there, which is it actually helped us launch Steph with the idea of doing the Fur Babies podcast because she's like, she got tired of talking about my podcast. I started hearing everybody talk about everything else. She's like, well, there's nobody talking about pets. I'm like, yes, hello, you should do a podcast. So kudos to that for the aspect of things there. Now, one of the things, what are some of the biggest mistakes you see people that are jumping in with podcasts? I mean, besides not being consistent, do they overthink the technology? Do they overthink the audio, the setup on things? Because it's gotten a whole lot easier to have a podcast than it was 5 years ago, right?
I think they just overthink everything. And I have a book that I'm coming out with, and the philosophy is very simple. And it's 2 words. It's start ugly. I'd rather you start ugly than trying to figure everything out. Now, I'm using the ATR 2100. I have it connected to the computer. You're using Zoom. When people ask me what I use, they're always surprised to know that I don't know how to use editing software, that I tell them I use Zoom. And some people will ask me, it can't be that easy. Well, I said, it is for me. I really don't want to complicate things. And I learned this a long time ago. When we were building the Tampa Bay business owners early on, we'd get our friends who were very tech savvy telling us, oh, you should get WordPress and then this plugin and that plugin. And now you have your online community. Well, my wife would every 6 months to a year, one of these plugins, WordPress would update and the plugins didn't communicate. And I realized, like, what the heck, man? It was cheaper to pay some company had an all-in-one solution, $99 a month or whatever. Now it's a lot easier. Back then, there weren't always industry leaders like we have now. So what I always tell people is don't overcomplicate the simplicity of podcasting. Get one of these microphones that you'll hear most of us recommend. They're dynamic microphones. They have USB capability. But then the other thing that people don't do is they don't niche down their topic. Like your niche, when you're niche, it's so much easier to compete. So I helped Tyler Sheff create Cash Flow Guys. He was already doing real estate. I just said real estate's a great niche. But if you were to ask me now to compete with Tyler, Kevin Bupp, a couple of our friends have grabbed a majority of that market share. Here you come in with We Close Notes. Well, guess what? No one grabbed that yet. So Scott comes in, and now you're pulling in big numbers. So if someone's coming to the real estate market, I just highly recommend having a niche because that's a really broad one. If you're a consultant, figure out what if your niche, if your advantage, if you don't have a niche, then figure out how you're delivering the information. What format might you have an advantage? We have a gentleman that's a CEO, Dean Akers. He started doing video podcasts. You could upload video to iTunes. Well, he's getting 10,000 downloads a month because there's not enough people in video podcasting in iTunes. So that little niche, just a format change, helped them find a whole audience that was looking for short videos.
Is there a time limit on the videos on the episodes in iTunes?
His are short, like 10, 15 minutes. I don't know much. A lot of us tried video years ago, but there was no audience there. Now there is. That's the other thing about timing. There is some luck to play. I'm a big in making your own luck, but there is some luck to play because 3 years ago, a lot of us tried video. Nothing happened. All we heard was crickets. Now here comes Dean. He doesn't know any better. Had he asked us, we tell him, don't bother, don't waste your time. But he tries it and he hits it out of the park because now the listeners are more savvy and the technology is easier for them to watch a video on their phone. So that, it's sometimes there's some luck to play on being at the right place, right time. And then the other thing with your interview is get right into the content. If you have a subject matter expert, introduce them and just try and get into whatever it is that you want them to share right away.
Yeah, because you lose the audience if you drag too much stuff off. They'll click over to something else when they're there to get the meat and potatoes of the episode, right?
Correct. Unless you have a fan base that's there for you, it doesn't really matter who you have. That's someone that's really pounding the street, building up their celebrity. But if you want people there for, like I do a podcast called the Conference Cash Flow Podcast. If I have someone on and they're specialists in retreats, I need to start with, okay, tell me how you got into retreats. Or if someone's a mastermind specialist, tell me about your masterminds and you specialize in high ticket items. How did you get into the high ticket item mastermind instead of the low ticket item? And then I explain the difference and then we get right into the content. Instead of saying, tell me your life story, how'd you start in general, blah, blah, blah. People that are listening to my Conference Cash Flow Podcast care about one thing, how to run their own conference and their live show, whatever it is, and they want you to get into the content.
Mm-hmm. When's the next, speaking of that, when's the next Podfest taking place?
So it's March 7th, 8th, and 9th in Orlando, Florida. Podfestexpo.com is the website. Highly recommend if you could, get stuff now during Christmas. We have a lot of cool specials coming out. And we've had a lot of people purchasing tickets, and we're going to have a lot of cool surprises for everybody. But, we have our treasure maps. Scott, I highly recommend you fill yours out. We'll have $30,000 worth of prizes that we're going to be giving away this year, which will double what we did last year. Last year, we gave out a lot of stuff.
Yeah, you did it gave a lot of stuff out there. Great vendors, great speakers, great sessions. But you also had I always pronounce it Pechakucha. I always pronounce it.
Yeah, the speed rounds.
Yeah, talk a little about that a little bit because I think a lot of people, if they get an opportunity to sit, they're going to learn a lot about other podcasters, potentially guests on, or have them on their shows, or just learn some of the things. That was great. I was an honor to be a part of that last year, and my 5 minutes, I think I filled pretty well. But it's a great thing. Yeah,
those are one of the greatest events we do because they always pack in. We'll get 60 to 100 people watching the fellow presenters, and you get 5 minutes to present your case, 20 slides. The slides automatically rotate every 15 seconds. And you could talk about anything that you'd like, anything you think is pertinent to your message. And it's really, actually, you're right. It's a really great place to get to know speakers and get to know one another as attendees. So this year, the Pechakucha is only open to attendees. So if you bought a ticket, so we want the attendees to really get to know each other even more. So we're opening it up to anyone that's an attendee. Plus, it's a big thing for us to produce. So we know attendees at least are more invested in that because we have to collect everybody's PowerPoints. We got to automate it. And we're excited this year to do our Pechakucha. People might know it as Ignite. That's a brand that it's more formalized. But the original intention and what it's really called is Pechakucha. And there's little 5-minute speed round presentations where people get to share, what is special to them.
Mm-hmm. Share very, very many TED Talk aspect of things back and forth.
It's 5 minutes. So if you hit a bad one, in 4 or 5 minutes, it'll be over. And then you go for they're mostly good, but honestly, I'd go to a lot of those. If you hit a bad one, it's going to be 4 minutes or 5 minutes. By the time they're done, then the next one comes up and they're usually amazing.
Exactly. Now, one of the things I think a lot of people struggle with is finding their voice of what they're going to talk about. You talked about briefly on what's their unique aspect, if they're, and I think a lot of people are like, well, I want to try to be like Joe Rogan, or I want to try to be like the guys on ESPN. And I'm always been a big fan. Look, just be yourself. Be yourself. That's the only thing you can really truly be. Because if you come out trying to fake it, it's really going to kind of crash and burn. Would you agree to that, Chris?
100%. Yeah, I'll just agree on that. The challenge with Joe Rogan, he's one of the best interviewers on the planet. And there's a couple of things that people don't understand. He has built a 30-year career in entertainment. So he has access to people that you might not. So if you do want to have deep conversations with people, wherever you live, you need to research. You need to be what I call a production-heavy show. And you need to research who are the most interesting individuals in your local area, and then you need to get them out. And all of his interviews are live in studio, so it creates a different element. You could definitely do some great interviews via Zoom, but when you have him live in studio, and he goes 2 to 3 hours, there's a lot of chemistry, and I think anyone could do what he does, but it'll be a lot tougher for you. So you just got to be willing to put in the work.
Mm-hmm. What's one of the best ways for people to leverage Podfest Expo that are coming onto it?
Well, this connect with the people attending. Like, I get people all the time like, well, I don't know if I want a podcast, but I'm like, are you doing anything online? They're like, yeah. I go, I recommend you come meet some of the top influencers in the world. Literally, of the 1,000 attendees, we'll have 200-300 beginners, right? Which we have a whole startup workshop for the beginners.
Yeah.
We'll have some of the top YouTubers in the world there. And everybody comes to Podfest to connect and meet with their fellow peer group. So it's a very special event. I've gone to other events where speakers are separated from the audience. And what happens is you can't network and create really important connections. Podfest is different. We're all one big family, and we try and help each other. Now, if someone's acting, douchey, they're not going to fit into our group. You have to want to, kind of like you, Scott. You came in and you were adding value. I saw you bouncing all over the place, meeting people. You're having a great time. And even if you're, we have a lot of introverts in our space. We have a lot of, we rented even more space this year. So there's space in quiet spaces that they could go relax, but people are very friendly at Podfest, and we want to make sure that you have a great time. And that's the philosophy of the whole event. So you'll meet a lot of amazing people making a great living through online mediums and tools as influencers.
Mm-hmm. Plus, you've also got a very active Facebook group as well, too. That's phenomenal during, before and after the event. And
the Facebook group is amazing. We just released one of the videos from the roast of last year of Dave Jackson. It's Rob Walsh's birthday, so we released his video of the roast. And Glenn the Geek yesterday had his radiothon. I don't know if you caught that, Scott, but he goes 12 hours live, and his whole community comes to life. It's amazing what you could learn. Some of our podcasters, what they do is amazing.
Yeah, I attend a little bit of that. You were also part of International Podcast Day with Tom and Tracy Hazard, who's say hello.
Oh yeah, they do. They're awesome. Podetize and the whole company over there. They're just great people.
Yeah, they do a lot of our production. We're good to be in partners with them on some stuff. But that's the thing. I think a lot of people. You said something earlier. People often overthink everything. I could know how to edit a podcast if I wanted to right now. I know how to upload it to Dropbox, and that's about it. Just get out and do it. There's plenty of vendors. You got a lot of great people coming out that can help people with their business as far as the production side of it. It's affordable. You've got hosting. You've got all sorts of different sponsors coming out to really help them from the A to Z of getting a podcast going. Right?
Scott, I know some people might not have the budget to hire editors, and I get that they have to learn to do it till they have money. But what really baffles me is the majority of people have the money. That's what, and I know they have the money because you kind of know their profession. They're flying different places. We get to see them on social media, and they won't invest $200 a month or whatever it is. I get some people don't have it. I get that. But the people that do have it and won't let go of the control, I don't understand that because they're trying to control all aspects. Try an editor. It doesn't go well. Guess what? Get another editor. Mm-hmm. You could really, for very low cost, you could have someone doing your editing for you. And I know, there's people creating tools to make it even easier. But I wouldn't let the technology stop you. What I do is when I do my interviews, I'll put them, the Zoom file will show up. I'll save the audio because I don't do a video side of it. I put it in my Dropbox folder, and then my editor then takes it from there. It takes the intro and outro, pastes them together. They'll put them up on Libsyn or whatever hosting you have. So it's not as hard as you think it is. And some of these words I'm saying might confuse people. It's really easy.
Yeah. What's you got any big surprises besides the sponsors, which you can't say? You got any big surprises for the upcoming event? Yeah.
I do, but I can't.
That's okay. Can't share them here yet, huh?
I can't share anything yet. What I could tell you is, Scott, last year we had William Hung from American Idol. We're definitely stepping it up this year coming up. So there's going to be a lot of amazing individuals and creatives. We are doing the roast of John Lee Dumas. So we will be roasting John Lee Dumas. He's signed the paperwork. So we'll be roasting him at the end of the whole event, the EO Fire community. That's exciting. But as far as really cool presenters, there's just so many. We haven't released them all yet. We still haven't updated our phase 2, phase 3 speakers. We just did phase 1. So you're going to see a lot of people coming online. And then there's going to be some really big names in the corporate side that you need to meet. And then there'll be some entertainment people.
Awesome. Well, we're definitely looking forward to it, Chris. And I don't want to take too much of your day because I know you're a busy man running all over the place. But final thing, you have been a big advocate of a little movie that's growing big leaps and bounds, The Messengers. Why don't you share a little bit about The Messengers?
So I think it's been 2 years now. We created The Messengers because we wanted to have a video representation of an audio medium. So we wanted our relatives, our friends, our family that were asking us, what the heck is this podcasting thing? I don't see it. They literally were saying, I don't see it. So we created The Messengers, a podcast documentary. We entered a couple of film festivals this past year. We did 2 semifinalists, one out of LA, one out of Sydney, Australia. Then we got chosen by 2 in Florida. So we did really well, but it's up on Amazon Prime, free for everybody. The Messengers, a podcast documentary, and iTunes. So it's been amazing, dude. I've always wanted to make a documentary film. I kind of want to make a couple more, but I did learn that it costs a lot of money to do it and do it to the level that I like. So I have an agreement with my wife. Investing money in a documentary can be a very expensive endeavor. And you don't want to chip away at your retirement for it, but you do want, if you have extra money, you put it aside. And if it's a side project, you have a pool of money. We crowdfunded it, and we were very fortunate to get 110% of goal, but as much as we crowdfunded, it needed even like double what we crowdfunded. So it's an amazing thing, but it's very tough to make money on movies unless you have a back end. For us, luckily, we have Podfest. But still, it's just a very tough endeavor. Hopefully January 1st, maybe, I might release it on Facebook for all of us to share with all our friends. The whole purpose of the movie is to get it out there.
And it's a great documentary. The Messengers, everybody, you can download it. Like you said, great show. Really, I've watched it a couple times. Enjoy it from the get-go. It really does paint a picture visually of what podcasters are dealing with and going through.
Hey, Scott, I got a question for you.
Yeah.
How has doing what you're doing impacted your business week close notes?
Wow. I'll tell you this, it impacts it daily because I get phone calls or emails or text messages from so many people that listen, that take tidbits from the show, tidbits from the episodes, and they apply it to their business. So I get that constantly. Monetarily wise, it has helped us in a variety of ways. It's helped us raise capital, several $100,000 in private capital raised from other people. It's helped us with our, webinar and coaching sales. We've had several people. But I'll give you an example. Last month, we had 7 people in for a very private, high-end training. 3 of them came across it because of the podcast.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it's been a significant addition to our bottom line, so much that I've tweaked up what I'm doing in 2019 to bring the podcast a little bit more. So, at the front, instead of doing all usually here in the office, as we go out to like Podfest, as we go out to other events that we're going to, we'll be doing live events with live episodes, recording and bringing guests on that are in the local community. So that's one of the big things for next year because it's adds such a big value to it. It's led to me getting booked on other podcasts, which has helped us get the audience out as well.
Are you getting speaking gigs at other real estate events just because of the notoriety, or?
I was already speaking quite a bit anyway. I built a pretty good name for stuff like that, but I'm getting asked on more podcasts a lot. I mean, we're also helping market for those speaking gigs. I'm actually slowing down on my going out speaking because the fact is travel a lot already. So it's made me be
It's funny you should say that. Katie and I both are being more selective of where we go, because like you could only travel so much. Then you're going to just travel where you would like to go. And yeah, good point. Yeah, because we're doing everything through the internet.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing, right? The world we live in.
It is totally. And one of the great things is last year, Steph and I took a 3-week trip to like Europe. We took a cruise and stuff like that. We had some guest hosts come on the show. 8 of our students, they rotated through his episodes, and our downloads didn't drop. They actually boosted for that time period, which is great to see. So we're going to definitely do that again when we take vacation. We're going to have a couple international episodes in January. I'm speaking in the Bahamas
Nice.
at an event. So we'll do an event live from there. We'll be in Barcelona and Portugal in July, and I'll do a live episode from there as well too, and some other places. So
That's awesome.
It's some fun stuff. We're definitely using the podcast, the power of the podcast, to kind of get more bang for a buck. If I do travel to an area, hey, let's do a live episode or a live meetup and go from there.
Now, when you say podcast, are you also including your live streams on Facebook?
Yeah.
So for you, it's all encompassing.
Yeah, it totally encompasses, because it's doubled our audience. Us doing, like, we're just under 200,000 downloads in the Note Closer Show in our first 16 months. But if we go back to the views on Facebook Live for our episodes are right at about 100,000, if not more. Our videos across YouTube and Vimeo that we both use are coming up about another 80 to 90,000 as well there. So using the video to record it and then live streaming it and then sharing it across the platforms has doubled our audience, because it's like what you said, since we know our audience is like 35 to 65, they're homeowners or business. They may not always have time or may not know what a podcast is, but they like to watch the video replays. So like on our YouTube channels, where the average person that watches the video is like 2 minutes on the video, our average watch time is close to 15 minutes.
That's great.
So that allows us to get a lot more feedback, a lot more actions from our audience as well.
So I'm assuming what happens for you, and correct me if I'm wrong, you'll have someone, they'll be like, man, I've been watching you for the last 6 months, and I just figured I'd reach out to you now, and I'd love to learn from you. And or I've been watching you since you began, blah, blah, blah. You've never seen me comment or anything, but I think I'm ready to work with you. Do you get a lot of that?
Every single day. And
that's a normal occurrence for anyone watching or listening to this. My wife gets that too. She'll have, you could call them like cyber stalkers, but they're not stalkers. They're just people that enjoy what you're doing. They don't even comment. You don't even know that they're passively. And then when they're ready, a year from now, they're like, hey, I'm ready to be coached, or hey, I'd like to join, blah, blah, blah. And it's weird because in marketing, you want to see people go through your funnel. And what they've done is kind of bypass it by just ingesting your content. And then they're ready to go high end. And the sale is a lot easier because they already know you, trust you, like you. They just want to know, okay, what am I getting when I enter this? Great. Here's my credit card. Let's do it. Right. You get that, right?
Yeah, I totally get it. And I see so many people that want the instant reaction. Like, oh, I only have like 500 downloads this month. I'm like, well, that's 24-hour day, 7-day-a-week advertising.
It's a lot.
Out there. It's a lot. But
people at 500 is a lot. And you build from that, right?
Yeah, you build from there. You never know when somebody's going to come across it. And that's why I like the fact of the video being out there and then the audio as well. It's two dynamic platforms that people learn differently from. But you never know when you plan to see, like we got some realtors that are watching, or some mortgage brokers and stuff like that. I think there's a big niche for that aspect in local markets, like our guys over at Selling Sarasota. They do
Shelly Pennis.
Exactly. They do a great job with their local market, interviewing local features. If I wanted to add another show, I'd be like, Eating Austin, or things like here locally.
Oh, I love Austin, man. The food scene's amazing.
It is, just all the fun stuff here. If I wanted to add something different, that's what I would do. I just don't have the bandwidth for it. But you never know who's going to listen. I've had people reach out to me and like, what, you listen to my show? Oh yeah, I'm kind of honored that way. You want to be on, that it's you joked about, oh, hey, you're the Note guy. I got that originally years ago from just sharing Facebook videos back before, but this has led to a whole different level of notoriety across the country.
Have you been offered for people to pay for sponsorship on your wall, like over your left or right shoulders?
Not yet.
You got to put a little sign.
You get your
sponsorship available. Yeah. The green side over your left shoulder right there has got to be worth something.
Well, I just need another bookshelf I'm putting in there for all my books I get. And it's worked out really well for some of our guests that have books. I'll bring them on and like, hey,
absolutely.
Give me 60 to 100 of your books to send out to my membership, and they love it. I'm like, hey, great. But yeah, I adding other things, some more trinkets. I'll put the sign over there, but that's a good idea. Hey, get this spot here. We'll offer that up. Actually, we've got our sponsors. That's one of the extra.
Listen, with mortgage people and title companies, it's worth that spot right there. I'm looking at is worth something to somebody, especially for your niche. But yeah, man, next year I'll be releasing the Start Ugly book. When it is, I'd love to come back and talk about that philosophy. But
yes,
it's based on what you and I are talking about. I've heard a lot of consultants, strategists, and they'll tell people all kinds of convoluted stuff. And I get that it works for that person, but starting ugly is probably the best antidote to overthinking anything. And I don't mean start crappy. All I'm saying is put all the stuff that's fear-based in your mind aside and just start. Like I get people ask me all the time, Chris, what if someone listens to my podcast? And I'll look at them and like, you just asked me, what if someone listens to your podcast? I go, yeah. I go, that's the whole point. But that question is a fear-based question. It's not a stupid question. What they're telling you is I'm afraid of people judging me. And if you really think about that philosophy, it happens with you or me. We started companies. I'm sure, I mean, you and I are both bulls in a china shop, but there are moments where we're like, oh, what if someone's, and then we're, usually we'll put it aside, like, we're going to do it anyways. But a lot of us, including me, depending on what it is, we get stuck sometimes overthinking something. And instead, we should just be thinking, no, start ugly and perfect it as I go. Because that's how my daughter's 3 years old. She will go up on a slide and, there's times that like she falls off and it's not, as a parent, it's not pretty to watch, but she masters it eventually. And she's always trying new stuff. If as little children, we didn't do that, we would never like survive, really.
That's the truth. It's instead of what if it fails, what if it succeeds? It's a whole different mindset.
That's the other mindset. But when we get older, our habits become more entrenched, and it's a lot difficult to transcend that. And that's just your brain, the way it starts getting wired. So you have to always remind yourself, start ugly. What if, like you said, what if it succeeds, and just move forward towards that. So I hope if anyone takes anything away from our conversation, what you're doing is amazing, but you're willing to start ugly and figuring out as you went along. Same thing with Podfest. I was, I probably should have started it sooner, but I was afraid about dealing with resorts. I've never, even though I did 2,000 events, were all localized, and I would only use a hotel for the day. I never did the sleeping rooms. But then I had to step out of my comfort zone and say, okay, I'll sign a 6-figure commitment with the hotel, and I have to have faith that I'll succeed. And I did. And I over succeeded, but still, if I wasn't willing to do that, I wouldn't be talking to you right now. You wouldn't have never found me.
Amen to that. Amen to that. You've done an amazing job. Guys and gals, go out, check it out, podfestexpo.com. He's got all sorts of discounts, whether you're listening to this live on Facebook Live or any of the videos, or you're listening to this on iTunes, Stitcher, or any of our other mediums out there for the audio. Check it out, podfestexpo.com. It is an amazing event. It will change your business up. If you're a brand new starter video, podcast, or whatever, you're looking to get into it, come out, learn, network with 1,000+ other people. You will not be disappointed. Like I said, it was one of the most business-changing events for us in 2018, bar none.
Yeah, and join our group on Facebook, Podfest Expo Community. It's a great group of people, over 1,000 people that care for one another. We'd love to have you apply, and then I'll make sure to accept you. And then the other thing is we have a code, holiday gift, all one word, all caps. Use that if you'd like our holiday gift code. We'd love to have you. And Scott, thanks a lot, man. Say hi to Steph and the fur babies.
Podcast, baby.
No, the podcast, but I'm sure you guys have fur babies at home, right?
We got 3 cats right now.
There you go. So
yeah.
We have feathered babies. We just added a bird yesterday or 2 days ago. So
very good. How many does that make for you guys?
We just have 2, but now we're going to have 2 kids, 2 birds. 2 is enough right now, until we get a bigger house. I'm happy with what we got.
There you go. Good stuff, man. Well, hey, thanks so much for coming on the Note Close Show, sharing some great nuggets. Chris, we really appreciate it. Got a lot of love online from people making comments on Facebook. Hearts and love to you. You're doing a great job. You build a great community, and just keep up the good work.
Thanks, brother. Thanks for being part of the community. Thanks for having me on, man.
Thanks, bud. Thanks for appreciating it.
All right. Later, Scott.
Yeah, bye.